just a brief video to everyone that's been asking, like, how do I do my photos and in BeamNG for the Discord channel that I've been doing recently. So this is just a mock-up scenario that you could see people doing online. It's not perfect, but it's the best I can do with the AI in the game. And this particular map is the Texas map. Texas, USA. So the biggest thing is going to determine how well your picture is going to come out. Obviously, the better your hardware, the better you'll be able to fastly move forward with your pictures and environment loading. Especially when you're doing this online, because everything's unpredictable with the queuing and people loading in new vehicles and new parts. So keep that in mind. The best tip I can tell you all doing it online is go into your settings down a little lower. You can turn your grass density as low as possible. It really serves no purpose to pictures, and a lot of times when you're doing these drag races, you're not going to see grass as often as like this picture does. But more or less, it's just a taste and your PC hardware limitations. Overall, if you're going to go for best quality, obviously the highest setting you can push out, the better. I don't bother messing with motion blur. I don't have a use for it, but other people likes it, so it's a taste preference. Dynamic resolution, depending on how you put your clear coat and roughness on your paint jobs of your car, really determines the shine of your car and how much reflections you're going to get out of it. So the higher your clear coat is and your roughness, you're going to get a lot more reflective quality out of it. Which will help with better pictures. If you have a car that has decent mirror reflections when you're doing a drive around and you see the mirrors, that could add a little bit of detail, but honestly, most of the time the mirrors on most cars don't work or they don't reflect properly from outside of the driver's perspective, so that's also a taste preference to particular vehicles. Online, I recommend having the tire marks lower if your PC is struggling. That will make it easier for you. And same thing with grass density. The lower that is, the better you're going to be off with your frame rate. Now, if we're going to say we're doing an online mock situation, say you pretty much try to find a position that you like, where you know there's a race event going on, or you're just looking for random photos in the lobbies, or you're getting ready to do your own photos with your car in a stance position. Say that people are just sitting here chilling and just waiting on something. Here's a good opportunity moment for photos if you can time it right and get in there properly and get your angles. This is going to be the trickiest part doing this online because you are at the mercy of everyone else, so you're not always going to be in the right spot, especially if you have nothing pre-prep. And what I mean by pre-prep is your quality, positioning, and also there's more detail in photo mode that you can actually turn on. This is where a little bit more juicier details come in for quality of the vehicles, and it comes down here at the bottom first. I always have that almost maxed out all the time. Same thing with radius. The radius is the surround shadows that you see under the car and up in the nook and crannies of some of these vehicles. Some have it way more than others, but I like having that mostly maxed out, or if not pretty close, depending on the vehicle that comes up. But mostly maxed out is most likely the way to go. The contrast is a taste preference. It does a little more detailing to it. So if you crank that up, you can see it gets rid of that little bit of detail here that you don't see, but it makes it kind of more realistic of a car in a shadow. but it can be blown out a little too much on certain vehicles. While that vehicle kind of looks still good, this one does not, the particular color palette it's using. So depending on how it looks on your end, you probably want to play around with that to see how much detail you want to show, but also kind of making it realistic to the shadows that you're trying to project. So that's also a preference as well. Online, I don't mess with this because it's too hard to get things focused in time and stuff. If they're sitting still, you can get away with it. Kind of figure out where your distance of your car is. Kind of figure out where your car distance is. You can tell by how it blurs out back here in the background for your distance. You see up here in the tree line of that adjustment being changed. And depending on where you have your settings set up determines how the rest of these will react. So it's a lot of trial and error on these ones. There we go. This one I don't play around with as much, but you can clearly see, like, if you know what you're trying to go for and you're looking for particular shots, you can achieve it with this setting if you know what you're doing and what you're looking for out front. But this is mostly something I don't do because mostly I'm playing with online and I don't have enough time to really home this in. And by the time I figure it out, most likely they're already gone. So a lot of times I just leave this alone as it is. Just try to take in the whole picture and just have it be done like this. Bloom is a very big key factor on certain maps. Some maps need a little more adjustment than others. So this will help out with a lot on certain reflective popping and dramatic blown out textures in certain areas. See, if I really crank it down, you can see what the bloom does to the world. There you go, right there. That's a perfect example right there on certain cars. Some cars on particular paint jobs will have this blown out effect on it on certain paint jobs. So you can almost never go below 2. Anything below that, you're kind of just not going to get the quality you're looking for. So I mostly just barely get it to just see that little bit of pop right in here. It's where it's kind of most realistic what you would see in real life in most photos. So about right there, about as good as that car would like to take it. Since this one didn't have that issue, this one doesn't have, just follows along with what that car needs to make it look good. And once you figure out that and baseline, pretty much these maxed out. These ones is always between almost at 6 and up. That's mostly what this is always going to be at for me. And bloom is always somewhere between 2 and 5. That's kind of where my threshold is, where I've been playing around with it at. I honestly don't touch the filters as often. There's a couple of good ones in there, but it's mostly if you're doing still imagery on your own and you know what you're looking for, that's for you. Online, I just leave it alone. Now here's where it gets tricky, where you're trying to set up everything, is sun direction and time of day. That's where the biggest things will come into play. And if you're looking for one more detail that I almost forgot, some maps has good skyboxes. So depending on the map, you can go in an environment and actually get some decent cloud cover. So if you're looking for like a gloomy situation, you can kind of get away with it here. If you're looking for a little bit of cloudiness, some maps have it way better than others, some actually don't have it at all. So preference. But I do highly recommend, if you see a map and you know it well, play around with this a little bit. Because on some cars, depending on the paint jobs, that cloud texture actually helps make the top of vehicles and certain things pop, depending on the gloss coating and what they perceive to be seen. Some cars see it way better than others, and some don't see it at all. But if you find a car that does show it a lot more often, you're gonna see a nice realistic effect to make it car pop out more. But mostly it's between those fog density, not really needed, mostly a preference thing. But if you're kind of struggling a little bit on your hardware, you can kind of bump that up a little bit in the background. It kind of will help you a little bit, but it also has a negative effect as well. So that's something that you have to play around with to figure out if it's what you're looking for or not. And sometimes on certain maps online, you cannot use these settings up here. And sometimes you can't even change these. So keep that in mind. Not all maps online will let you do this. So that's why a lot of times I don't mess with it, or it's not on my front of my mind to mess with. Most of the time when I do my color changing, I'm always in photo mode figuring all this out. Sadly, it does not save my preferences when I change them. So a lot of times I just go by muscle memory. I almost get it to where I want if I'm trying to get back on track. Now, depending on how your angle you're shooting for, with drag racing, there's not many angles you can get away with. It's always between 2 and 3 o'clock and 1 and 3 o'clock. Somewhere in those regions is where you go for. Very few times you're going to get a good side profile, especially if you're trying to time a launch. It's going to be very hard and you just might miss your shot in general, so just keep that in mind. But if you know what you're looking for and you have a little bit of experience, you can play around with this and figure out what you're trying to go for. Especially like these silk profile shots from the back and stuff, you can get that good reflective car going on in your environment. Sometimes you can get the other opponent's car in there. This is where playing around with the time of day really helps make things shine. Right there, you see like that little change right here. Certain time of the day helps this pop more, and some other time of the day helps paint jobs pop more. So you're going to have to play around and figure out what helps pop out what on certain vehicles, certain times, and certain maps. So it's a big learning curve, so I won't be able to tell you all. It's just some things are going to pop out more than others on certain maps. But the biggest thing I can say is sometimes when you're looking for a specific kind of quality, I normally try to shoot for just a little bit up in the sunrise. I notice in Beam, that's kind of where I noticed the peak quality and reflectiveness, reflections, and the quality of certain paint jobs and whatnot. And then sun direction is a big help, getting that sun to beam in a specific angle that you're staying at. So normally I look for like one object that I know that's where it's at for me. Like there's a tree right behind me that I can tell. Helps me know where that is. But you also got to keep it in mind for the environment around you. Sometimes you don't want a tree in your shot, or a pole, fence. So you got to play around with where everything is, where you're going to get your image quality and your angle. Because the closer to morning and sunset, you're going to get this like mood color setting, and the higher in the day, you're going to get a brighter quality. So depending on what you're shooting for, you're going to get a slight different quality. It's pretty much a taste preference to what you're going for. The best thing I can say is, like, if the sun's behind you or whatever your direction is, you're going to get more detail regardless. But not more detail is not always better, because sometimes whatever tires they have on or kits they have on, more direct sunlight on it actually can make it look worse. It will make it show more of imperfections of the car. So keep that in mind. So a lot of times I try to have the sun kind of looking at it kind of front facing a little bit, but also getting it a little bit on the side. So I'm covering as much as two sides of the vehicle and the top. Now for me, I have my settings for zoom on my camera set on my mouse. So when I'm in the middle of looking around and doing something like that, and I'm moving my camera around trying to get in position, I don't have to take my hand off the controls to do my zoom and zoom out. I don't have to move my hands away from anything. Depending on your mouse, if you have additional buttons on them, that will be a big help. If you can get away with it or you like using it, sometimes you can use the scroll wheel if it will work. Not always. You can use the scroll wheel to make your camera go up and down directly as well. That's good for cinematic photos and stuff like that, so if you're doing videos and whatnot, that will help with that. But just taking photos, you mostly are just trying to get into one spot, waiting for vehicles to get in the frame. Playing around with your focus, fisheye mode, and stuff like that. That's what you're trying to work on. And if you can't remember your camera, focus that, you just quickly pop in here for your field of view. It'll snap you back where you kind of were, and then you can go, and it resets you kind of muscle memory of where you're going to be at. Now the big thing is doing this online. You're going to be like time limited. You got to kind of just go with the flow. You're not always going to get the photos you're looking for. It's not going to look great. So sometimes if you see a gap in what I post and whatnot, it's a lot of times I just didn't get the shot. It's just what happens. You can't get them all. So this is just a little AI scenario. It's nothing close to the realisticness, but it's about the best AI can manage to do on their own. So you're gonna be kind of playing around, trying to speed run, trying to find a good quality setting that you like. And a lot of times that happens a lot right there. That was perfect. I was so close to getting a good shot. Missed it. So it will be frustrating. Keep that in mind. That's what's going to happen a lot. You can just be one click away from getting that picture that you want. Now pretty much coming down to the last two is the three big ones. This is hardware specific. Depending on what you have, these will push out different quality images. Let's see if I can make it work for you guys. Get them over here real quick, see if I can get it to happen. There we go. Now say if I did get to a good spot and I'm happy with it. See right there, that's a perfect shot. The sun's not actually behind me, but some vehicles actually look good with that. Then you just play around with your focus. That helps make cars look good. 2 points. I kind of tried to keep them in this imaginary line box right here on the edges. That way I know I'm guaranteed to have them in the car, and if I want to swap it out afterwards, I can. So I don't have to play the guessing game. Did I get it all in there, or did I not? So that's where those lines play. So I'm going to do a normal one. And a big. And a huge. Sorry, GPU, kind of pushed you a little too hard on that one. And I guess that was a good example right there. Sometimes you will crash in the middle of this. It's a sad thing. Oh, I got 2 of the photos, so I guess better than nothing. Okay, so you can see what the normal one is right here in size. Barely 3 megabytes, so you can tell it's a lot less quality. This is the medium. This is the most likely one I always use. It's very minor detail differences that I'm showing, but it's hardware based. Really, the only difference you see is really back here in the grass. The sharpness in the trees and branches that you see in the background. A little bit here in the chrome trim. And just a little bit of bloom in the whole image in the middle. So you're going to have to experiment on your own to see how your hardware handles taking the pictures. I know it's a brief tutorial and stuff, but a lot of the hardware stuff is mostly going to be on your end. So just keep that in mind. If you have a good idea of what angles you're shooting for and trial and error, you have a very good chance of achieving a lot of these scenario pictures.